All right, well, we're back. It's hour number 3.5, almost 4. We've been here. We knocking them out. And my man Anson Asaka, I get it right?
Yes.
Yeah. I told y'all. He's with us, running in the 4th Council Madden District, and I see by your website, y'all can see it as well, www.ansonasaka.com, that you graduated cum laude from Howard University.
Yes.
With a bachelor's in political science back in '92, Rutgers Law School in '96.
That's right.
And you probably will be the only attorney on the Baltimore City Council we win. You know that, right? But I see you're also something like a radical. You know, I see you're protesting Republican political strategist and known racist, by the way, Lee Atwater and his appointment to Howard's Board of Trustees back in the day, the affirmative action over at Rutgers before going to work at my spot, the NAACP, in their legal department back in 2004 when my man Kwaizi was over there. So it sounds like you should be running for Congress more than the city council. You know, what inspired you to get into the race for the city council?
I wanted to make a difference in our city of Baltimore. I wanted to see change in the city. And I think that I have the necessary skills to bring about that change. I have the necessary drive, the necessary commitment and dedication, and proven and demonstrated commitment and dedication to social change. You know, all of my adult life, I've been about changing society through my activism as a student at Howard University, as you mentioned, even while I was in law school. You know, when most people are focused on getting some corporate job, I was still focused on bringing about change on the campus there to prevent someone from disparaging a project, affirmative action, which made it possible for me to get an education at a law school. So I've always been about change. After I graduated from law school, instead of working for some corporate law firm, you know, working for Wall Street, I decided to work for the people to fight against racism and discrimination in this society. And I see this as another aspect of that fight to bring about change in society, moving from litigating cases or being involved in cases to actually setting public policy to make a difference. So it's going beyond just fighting the power into actually seizing power and making a difference in communities. One of the things that I noticed in my community near York Road and Woodbourne, I noticed that there's trash on the streets everywhere. I noticed that there's an open air drug market over there. I noticed that there are abandoned buildings, and the public has complained about these buildings and nothing has happened. As people have mentioned, there was a shooting on Tunbridge Road where somebody got shot and killed, you know, and the community had been complaining about this for a long time. So I see these types of things in our community and I want to change them. I want to do what I can with my skill set to make a difference in my community. As you mentioned, I am a lawyer, and one of the roles of a city council person is to make laws and ordinances for the city. And I think that I have the skills, unlike any of these other candidates, to actually make laws that will make a difference in our community.
Hey, you mentioned York or Woodbourne, and I love the 4th district, that's my district. And you look at, you talked about York and Woodbourne, drug activity right there, the dirt, the trash, the filth, methadone clinic right there. And it's right on the corner where the councilman's district office is. Like, I never get that. And, you know, people know Bill Henry Sr. is like a father to me. Love Bill Henry to death and his staff. But how do you walk in and out to work every day with drug dealers on your corner and not do anything about it?
Right. I mean, that's one thing that troubles me. Like, you see these signs for these candidates in the midst of chaos, these signs for running for office, and you see basically living hell on earth where you have people strung out on drugs, walking around like zombies. Like, one time my car was not working and I had to actually walk my daughter somewhere in the community, and she was afraid to be in that environment. And I've talked to voters who've said that they are afraid to come out at night because of the environment. You have drug paraphernalia, you know, all over the street. Like, when I do community cleanups with St. Mary's Church, when we're cleaning up, we see drug vials all over the street, like all over York Road. And something has to be done about this. And too often, our politicians explain to us why we can't make a difference, why we can't get the trash up, why we can't get rid of these open air drug markets. I mean, there's a police car stationed on York Road, but it doesn't deter the crime. I mean, the police are just in a car, as many people complained about, just sitting in that car. Meanwhile, you have open air drug market going on around this police car. You don't have the police patrolling the streets in a way that would make a difference. And I have a problem with that. I want to see change. Every day when I go to work and come home from work, I see this disaster on York Road, and I see fundamental differences in this city. It's like two different Baltimores on each side of York Road. Like, you have one side that's impoverished, is predominantly black, and poor educational system, and poor, lack of jobs and opportunities. On the other side, you see basically prosperity and people living well in these nice homes and mansions in some cases. And something about that picture disturbs me. We need to have one city where everybody has equal opportunity regardless of what zip code they live in, and that's what I plan to work on. That will be my mission as a city councilman, to see some kind of difference, to do something about the racial inequity that exists in Baltimore City. And that's something hardly any of these candidates are going to talk about. They don't want to talk about race because they're afraid of offending people, but I'm not afraid. I'm here to speak truth to power. That's why I'm running.
It's funny you say that. I was just driving with my son the other day, and he asked me, you go on one side of York Road, like you said, people are jogging, morning jogs, and people don't look like us usually. House is nice, grass all cut, and he's like, Dad, why? It's normal for us to see them jogging in the morning and all that. But we get on the other side of York Road, if you see somebody running, they probably did rob somebody or they're running from the police. Now this is from the mouth of a 13-year-old, right? But he's just really acknowledging what he sees. And it really makes you wonder, within literally a block, you can see a vast difference between the homes and how they're kept, to just the environment itself and how people kind of coexist.
Right, and then like if you go north on York Road, you see like it's like you cross into a whole nother universe. Like the streets are clean all of a sudden. You don't see people hanging out selling drugs. And it's like we need to have one Baltimore where all people are treated the same, with equal opportunities and equal law enforcement presence. It's like we have to deal with these problems that we see, and it's like I'm tired of the same old, same old. You have these people that are just a part of the establishment. They come up under one of these establishment figures, and they just continue the cycle. And that's the reason why I want to enter this, to be a voice for change. Like, I'm not a career politician. I'm an attorney. Like, this is my first time ever running for office or even fully participating in a campaign. And, when I see these conditions that exist in my community, I want to see it change. So that's the driving force behind what I'm doing.
So where do you see yourself making that change? As the next councilman, what would you do, or systems you will put in place? From hindsight, of course, you don't know until you really get in, but now, what would you think would be that driving force of change that you would like to see?
Well, like, the driving force for change would be to address the fundamental problem of poverty in Baltimore City. I mean, a lot of the problems that we see in terms of the drugs, in terms of the violence, come from poverty. The lack of opportunity, the lack of educational resources. All of these things fuel a situation where you have hopelessness, where you have young people that are forced into a life of selling drugs in order to survive. And with that trade comes violence. So we need to address the fundamental causes of the violence. And you have models in places like Oakland, California, where they were able to substantially reduce the violence by concentrating and focusing on those segments of the population that are likely to engage in the violence and are likely to be victims of violence by directing, resources to those areas, those communities, by having call-ins and check-ins, and just making sure that people have other opportunities. And another thing that has to be addressed is like the recidivism that exists. Like you have people that come out of jail and they're already behind the 8 ball because they don't have certain skill sets or whatever, but then they face legalized discrimination where they are discriminated against in terms of being able to get student aid for, to go to college. So that makes it hard for them. They're discriminated in terms of job opportunities and housing. So they end up in a cycle where they end up back in the criminal lifestyle, and that fuels the violence that we see in our cities and the drugs that I've been complaining about. So I would address those fundamental issues like the poverty, the education, and just the lack of resources and opportunities.
So if you were elected, which committees would you like to serve on or chair, and what's the major 1 or 2 issues that you feel you would be a champion of?
Right, so in terms of the committees, I would like to serve on the Budget and Appropriations Committee because that decides how resources are allocated. It has, some kind of role in that area. And then also public safety, since that is the #1 issue that the voters have mentioned to me, and that we see every day on the news. We hear about somebody getting shot all the time, someone shot on Tunbridge, a 2-year-old shot in a car. And then you had the situation of Taylor Hayes, a 7-year-old shot and killed in the back of a car. And as the other person was saying, this should be a cause for alarm in our community. This should be cause for national concern. And you do have segments of the community that are engaged, like you have the Baltimore ceasefire movement and others that have been speaking out about this violence that plagues our city. But we look at other situations where you'll have a shooting at a school and you hear all the politicians talking about the need to change laws and all that kind of stuff. We need to have that same kind of urgency in our community.
Surprised you didn't mention the judiciary as the lawyer. So what do you think is your strongest asset and your biggest liability when it is against you?
Well, my strongest asset are, first of all, my passion for change, my passion for progress. This campaign is about peace and progress and prosperity. That's one thing, my passion for the people and for change. Another thing is my skill set, my skills as a lawyer, my skills as a political scientist, somebody that studied politics. So that's one thing. And just my demonstrated commitment. It's not like I'm just somebody that came here and just started talking about how I'm committed to change. I have 15 years as a civil rights attorney to prove my commitment. Years as a student activist, years at law school where I've demonstrated my commitment to change. So those are like some of my strengths. And I don't want to brag or anything, but I think I've said enough about my skills. But in terms of weaknesses, sometimes that same passion can be my weakness because that passion will have me so wrapped up in work that sometimes I won't have the time to spend with my loved ones like I would wish. And so that's one thing, one weakness that I have.
Remember, you're listening to the Value My Vote 2020 interviews. I'm sitting with Anson Asaka, and you can reach and find all of the interviews from today's laundry list of interviews at www.DMVDailyNews, and of course on our Facebook page, DMV Daily News, as well as Value My Vote 2020's Facebook page. So, I'm talking about the city council race, and I've asked every candidate this is the issue that highly important to myself individually and to a lot of people. If elected, would you support a charter amendment which would eliminate the 2 mayoral appointees who serve on the Board of Estimates, leaving it up to the 3 citywide elected officials?
Yes, what I think, in terms of the budget, I think that we need to have a more democratic process where you have the city council have more input and influence over the budget. because we have a situation where we have all this money going to law enforcement and, you know, less money going to education. You know, if you don't deal with prevention and stuff like that, preventing, you know, these factors that lead to the crime, then you're just going to have the same situation. I mean, you could have the governor pour in millions of dollars to law enforcement, and it may temporarily, you know, change things or whatever, but since it doesn't deal with the underlying cause of the problem, you're going to see the situation continue regardless of how much money you put in law enforcement. So we need to have a voice in the budget process. And we need a more, you know, just a more democratic city council and city government, period.
I always say, I've done an issue of mine forever. You put 11 to 15% into education, but 50% of the budget goes to public safety. And every other jurisdiction is completely opposite. They put in almost 50% to their education and 15 to 20% into their public safety. And we see the results in neighboring jurisdictions and those in Baltimore City. So for those who want to learn more about your run and were inspired by your words, want to get involved in your campaign, how can they reach you? I know we got the website up, www.ansonasaka.com, but is there other ways for them to be able to get
Yes, they can email me at ansonasaka@yahoo.com, and they can also email me at ansonasaka@gmail.com. They can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at Anson Asaka Baltimore. I'm also on Facebook at Anson Asaka. People can follow my campaign there. They can go to my website, ansonasaka.com, and make donations. And they can actually reach out, if they're interested in volunteering, they can reach out to me. I need volunteers, I need donations. We want this to be a campaign for the people, by the people, of the people, not a campaign of the corporations and the developers. So we need the people, if they are interested in this campaign, to donate their money and their time to the campaign.
All right, there you hear it from the man himself, 4th District City Council candidate, Anson Asaka, joining us. And we got one more interview left in us. That's all I got left in me. I'm telling you, I'm about to fall out. But we're waiting. One more candidate from the 14th Councilmatic District will join us in about 2 minutes. I'm Anson Giordano, and this is the DMV Daily Productions, the Value My Vote 2020 interviews, and we'll be right back.